Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, we're going to talk about a couple of little sales, the mount deal, and what comes next in terms of priorities between striker and goalkeeper and all of that. Coming from a new office, I was moving over the weekend from work, moving my office and moving locations. So a little bit of a different background and different setup, but hope you enjoy. Get a little bit of a view and some nice brick here, so a little bit different. All right, so moving forward, today we have Mason Mount arriving at Manchester United to complete his medical ahead of the move to Manchester United permanently. And obviously no issues expected there. Just to clarify, because sometimes people bring this up, there's not really a matter of failing a medical result of his injury, things like that. There's nothing really to worry about with things like that. Generally, the club will already have pretty much all the medical information there. He will move in. He will be able to start training pretty much right away. Quickly, I think he'll probably go settle in and come back later in the week on Wednesday or Thursday. Obviously, some other players have already arrived, and Dean Henderson's been there a little while. Donny van de Beek, Lisandro Martinez, some players who are rehabbing essentially are there a bit early to get ready. United may ask Mason Mount to participate in that a little bit, just to make sure they're up to date exactly on where his injury is at and that everything is all good. But he should be all fine now at this point in time. He was targeted to be fully ready by way back in May. So I think by now everything should be good there. He's been working hard on fitness and things like that. So Ten Hag will be happy when he resumes training here to have his midfield pretty well oriented for what he wants to do, at least for the current. In the meantime, United have been moving forward with raising a little bit of money on some sales and things like that. Ethan Laird left the club with a decent sell on. Zidane Iqbal, as we know, already left. There's a couple other little things in the works that I can bring up. Number one, obviously, there's reports of Tahith Chong moving from Birmingham City to potentially Luton, and that is looking like around a maybe 8 to 10 million fee. It's been reported United have a 25% sell-on clause. I actually believe it's a little bit higher, but we'll see. As far as I hear it, it may be more like 40%. So, funnily enough, United, who sold Tahith Chong for under $1 million, may be able to recoup around $4 million on a sell-on clause. But hey, that's the reason why you do it. And that little bit is just adding to the pot. And the funny thing about this whole FFP business, when you think about kind of the joke of it, and as I've said a few times, my understanding is that United are not really limited by FFP. It is rather an excuse that is being used to replace why they do not have the cash to spend, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. But you make a sale, you get like 4 million from Chong, 1 million from Iqbal, 750 from Laird. You're talking about 6 or 7 million in euros in sales of basically pure profit. Now, 6 or 7 million, when you average it over an FFP over 5 years of amortization, that's 30 million in transfer fees. So tell me again, with those 3 little sales, why United could not move forward with a goalkeeper purchase of around 40 million pounds on top of their striker. Those tiny little sales make that room in FFP. It doesn't make sense. It's nonsense. It's not the reason why. It's being used to cover up the situation that is ongoing because of the delayed takeover and the Glazers, which is that the money is not being made available. There's a little bit more to come on that too. United have obviously done a fair bit of business with Birmingham City, and they're in discussions over potentially a few other players, including Will Fish, and including potentially a loan for Anthony Elanga. However, the wages may prove a bit high. United probably have to cover a bit there, but they're interested in both of those players. So keep an eye on that, because there could be more business being done with Birmingham City. Obviously, Hannibal was on loan there too and is returning and all of that, and they highly rated him there as well. Moving forward, let's talk about this goalkeeper and striker situation, because obviously this is the hot topic. We know that we've gotten that midfielder in Mason Mount, who was signed first because he was top of the list for his position, really wanted United, excellent young player, and someone that United felt that they could acquire. And as I mentioned, one of the key issues to this, which I have confirmed many times over at this point in time, comes down to payment terms. Can they get a deal done on favorable payment terms? And with Mason Mount, the answer is yes. And that's where we're seeing, some of these issues here kind of coming up overall when it comes to, these signings. So let's talk through all the different names that I understand have validity and where they are at. Andre Onana, personal terms wouldn't be an issue. Essentially, there's a deal on the table that would be around 42 million pounds plus add-ons. Obviously, a player that Ten Hag has worked with before, that he really likes, that would revolutionize the game in terms of the way that United build out and play out the back. So strong first choice. He would be coming in as, of course, a first choice goalkeeper, replacing David De Gea, who is now out of a contract and no longer employed by United. But I know for a fact that United have not ruled out re-signing David De Gea. It is not just PR. It is not just BS. It is real. They plan to talk to David De Gea. They plan to go over the situation. Effectively, it's a little bit of a joke because it's like, hang around in case we don't have the money to sign your replacement. We might still want you. It's weird. David De Gea is still rated, in my opinion, too highly by people at the club versus his ability and talents. The issue, of course, is no matter what they say about Dean Henderson and that he could start, if that were the case, they wouldn't need to keep talking about David De Gea. They could just have Dean Henderson play for a year and then sell him and buy a keeper next year if needed. But that's not the issue. Dean Henderson is not in a good headspace with Manchester United. They're not on the best of terms on the coaching-wise, but hey, we'll see. He's there in training now. He said in his interview last year that if they got to see him one time, then Erik ten Hag would make him his goalkeeper, and he didn't want to create a conflict. Well, he's there now, so who knows? Maybe some things will change, and Erik ten Hag will decide, you know what? Dean Henderson's a viable option here. Maybe we keep him and make him the first choice goalkeeper, and then we don't have to buy anybody. And we don't sign David De Gea. So anyway, on Onana, the deal is effectively there as far as I hear it, and as far as I understand. If they want to get a deal done, they could get a deal done. It's kind of that simple at this point in time. If they want to get a deal done, they'll get a deal done. And I believe I mentioned in my last video that if you see it stalling, after all that noise and hype and excitement and talks and bids coming and all of that, that you know what the reason is. It's because, of course, that, there's no money, there's no cash. And you have these two positions to prioritize. Now, the other name is, of course, this Justin Bijlow from Feyenoord. And I don't know much about him personally. I've seen a lot of mixed messages about him. He's got a pretty bad injury history. He's a very aggressive keeper, though, obviously more of a modern style. I've seen good and bad. I don't know much about him. What I do know is that he was on Manchester United's list as a potential number 2 down the list. And as far as I understand it, if they were to sign a Justin Bijlow, it would be with another goalkeeper, like bringing David De Gea back, or Onana if they had the money for it, but it would be with another goalkeeper. He would not be some guaranteed number 1 that would mean we definitely have a new number 1 keeper. There's definitely a scenario where he is brought in with David De Gea coming back, and who knows who's going to be the first choice keeper. You'd like to think that it would end up being him, but then you're back to the situation. What if he gets injured? What if he's not totally healthy? He's had quite a few injuries. You're back to David De Gea playing in net. A bit of a concerning situation to me. And as I understand it from somebody who has told me this, that deal's pretty much done. If they want it, again, it's like pull the trigger and it's done. And this is what John Murtaugh does, and actually does very well. And he did it last year too. There was a lot of concerns over no deals happening for quite a while, and outside of the Frankie de Jong situation, which I don't really put on him, there was a few things lining up with Malaysia, Martinez, Eriksson, and others, and then it was just a matter of pulling the trigger and getting deals done kind of like dominoes. And so as I mentioned before, they're lining up all the different kind of scenarios. So they have Justin Bijlow, have Onana essentially lined up. Striker-wise, they're still working on the details of this Rasmus Højlund deal to see if it's viable, and they are also looking at Taremi. It is a valid name. Whether it's a good signing or not, it is a valid name that is on the list that there's some interest in if this scenario goes that way. And so effectively what they're going to be looking at, and those aren't the only names, there's things like Yao Felix on loan and things like that as well. They're not the only names. Gonzalo Ramos is still a name, depending on the terms. A lot of it's going to come down to fees, terms, and when and if other sales are being lined up and there's any other priorities, because the biggest issue is United do not have a lot of cash available for transfers at this point in time. So they might be looking up, and how you might be seeing it is lining up different scenarios, right? And they might be saying, okay, what's our ideal scenario for these two positions in terms of what's available right now? Maybe our ideal is Onana and Ramos, that we get in Ramos up front and Onana and goalkeeper. We let De Gea go. We lose Dean Henderson. Maybe whatever. But they're going to look at that and say, okay, that's going to cost 140 million euros or so to get done, or maybe 130 million euros or so. What are the payment terms? We don't have the cash for it. Let's ask if we can get that kind of money. And right now the answer is no, or silence, essentially, or they would be moving forward with that kind of scenario. Then you go down and it's like, okay, well, maybe an Onana and Højlund is our best second scenario. Can we afford that? Maybe the next is, Ramos plus Bijlow and Dean Henderson staying. Maybe the next is Højlund and Bijlow. Maybe Onana and Felix, Onana and Taremi, Felix and Bijlow. And then you're coming all the way down to like, De Gea and Taremi as a possibility, with Bijlow coming in as competition. And you can see how the scenarios could progressively get worse and worse and worse. But they're going to be looking at all of these scenarios because these decisions are not made in a vacuum. It's not about one player at a time. Deals aren't actually done one at a time, and they never have been. The way United have planned for years, and that is continued, is through a list of priorities and a list of scenarios and figuring out, can we get all of these things done? And a big part of the reason for the Mason Mount deal was they needed to get that deal done at a certain price and with the cash that they expected to have available, where it wouldn't really hinder them. And because of the success of that negotiation and getting it paid over time, it's not the hindrance, it's not the issue. The issue is more to do with the cash available for these transfers and the types of deals on the table. What have we not heard about with Onana? That 40 million, how did they want it to be paid? Because Inter need money to pay back some loans. With Rasmus Højlund, we haven't heard. How do they want that money? Is it 50 million euros if it's up front, and 80 million if you want to spread it over 5 years? Maybe. And that might be the difference and why you're seeing different prices. We don't really know all of those details, but those are the types of scenarios that they're going to be looking at, that they're going to be making comparisons on, and that they're going to be walking through and figuring out where to go next. So they're going to be lining them up. This is what an Onana deal would take. This is what this would take. This is what this would take. This is what this would take. And if they cannot get a suitable deal, it's also about value, right? Just because striker's more important, they're not going to pay way over the odds for somebody and screw up getting a goalkeeper. They'd rather probably get a goalkeeper like Onana, who's on a fair value, versus spend 80 million on Rasmus Højlund, which is not fair value. So there's scenarios, and one of the scenarios that certainly has been on the table is Rashford playing at striker and bringing a goalkeeper in. I don't think that's their best scenario. I don't think that's what they want the most, but it's a possibility when you have Garnacho and Sancho off the left, when you still have Martial on the books, when you have Anthony on the right, when you may have Mason Greenwood returning, when you have Pellistri and Ahmad, etc., right? But they're also going to be looking at how to utilize all of these young players and assets and things to see if they can't figure out deals. And they're not going to pull the trigger until they know what all the scenarios are, make a final attempt to say, what can we get to spend? Is there any way that we can get some money available and then move forward with it with the best case scenario? And obviously there's probably a thought process too, or a wonder, if we wait a little bit, is there a potential we can get another answer versus to get more money, versus the situation of we need to get Ten Hag players in now. And so it's a complicated situation. I don't envy them, and I also certainly don't put necessarily the blame on them. Now, at the same time, I think it's kind of ridiculous that they're even considering, in my opinion, bringing back David De Gea in any respect, because there's no reason for it at this point in time. It's like, but again, it's purely a cost-saving exercise if that is, the direction that it ends up going, or that they have to do because of money. And yeah, so it's a tricky situation that we're in. I'm just checking a message here, but Yeah. So as I see it, you might look at Justin Bijlow as a replacement for Dean Henderson, and then David De Gea being replaced by a number one is likely kind of how it's viewed, or staying and having the two of them. So kind of look at it that way. But a lot of deals could be knocked down pretty quickly, like in these two areas, if they can make that decision, and if they're not going to get an answer on money, or if they get one that just says, no, we're not going to give more, that's your cash, that's the money, go ahead with it. There's a lot of stuff out there one can look into on this whole FFP and cash flow thing to see that it is not a valid excuse. And the cash that the club have, they could spend. It's not a matter of not having money, but a willingness to spend and put money on a credit line and such during a takeover. So a lot of that's been kind of confirmed. That's why I said it's like you keep waiting. You had a lot of reports over the weekend starting to walk back that Onana interest, exactly kind of as I expected. Not the interest, but walk back the imminentness of the deal with concerns over striker and budget and everything. So it all just has to be factored in. And that's the best that we can say about it, right? I expect that they want to make these decisions pretty soon, because Erik ten Hag will want his team solidly together on and for preseason, and there's a good chance of that still. Not to say more signings can't come later, but with everybody returning, he's going to be saying, look, Tom Heaton might be my goalkeeper in training next week. That's not going to work. We got to sort this out. And unless they can repair things with Dean Henderson, which it just feels unlikely. And, it seems like he could go really at any moment in time. So we will see. So now, moving on to the takeover, not a ton of detail, obviously, to give here. It's as everybody knows, I mean, it's been pretty quiet. And it's a holiday in the U.S. A lot of people aren't working today. Tomorrow is July 4th. So I don't expect that you're going to hear much. I do hear, or I have understood, that there's some sort of discussion set to occur after July 4th with, I'm not saying with relevant parties, like I'm not saying that I'm hearing with like Ineos or with Qatar or whatever, but with regards to the board and rain and these types of things. So we'll see what kind of outcomes there are there. But there's a lot of frustration building on the part of people involved, not getting answers back, and people who are involved in even advising and all of that, and just that it hasn't moved forward the way that it's supposed to at this point in time, and that it continues to somewhat delay. So we'll have to see. I don't expect, as I kind of mentioned, it's been dragging. I don't recall exactly what I mentioned or said in the last video, but it's been dragging. It's not, as far as I understand it, been communicated to anybody that there's any kind of done deal or agreement, or that there's agreement among the Glazers. There's some interesting scenarios kind of in play with the whole Glazer siblings, and it's not really pretty. So we'll see if it gets resolved. It's the type of thing that could be, but it's also having a huge effect on the budget. And it's not necessarily, this Glazer doing this, but, as a family, the inability to come together, the inability to agree on things is a big part of the reason for a lack of spending and a lack of spending power as well, and the reasons that come with that. So, but I am expecting that perhaps we'll get news following that meeting after July 4th. Okay, so thank you for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. I will definitely give updates through the week as I see if we get anything that looks indicating on these player situations, where they're going, which scenario they're going to move forward with, as I hear. But whichever one they start to move forward with first, whether it's on the goalkeeper, strikers, probably a good indication of where it's going to go on the other end based on the budget. Okay, thank you for watching. Talk to you later.